Welcome to today's Read Aloud. Today we'll be reading When Marian Sang, written by Pam Munoz-Ryan, pictures by Brian Selznick. No one was surprised that Marian loved to sing. After all, she listened to her father singing in the morning as he dressed. Mother often hummed while she worked in the kitchen. Sometimes Marian and her little sisters Ethel, May, and Elise sang songs all afternoon. However, her voice was distinct, strong and velvety, and able to climb more than 24 notes. Everyone wanted to hear Marian sing. Alexander Robinson, the choir director at Union Baptist Church in South Philadelphia, wanted to hear Marian sing even though she was not quite 8 years old and sometimes sang too loud. He asked her to perform a duet with her friend Viola Johnson. As Viola sang the high part and Marian sang the low, their harmony blended like a silk braid. Church folks started whispering and followed with out-and-out talking about Marian's remarkable gift. Neighboring churches heard the news and invited Marian to perform. One advertisement said, "Come and hear the baby contralto, 10 years old." And people came. When Marian sang, it was often with her eyes closed, as if finding the music within. Audiences heard not only words, but feelings too. Spirited worship, tender affection, and nothing short of joy. She was chosen for the celebrated People's Chorus, 100 voices from all the black churches in Philadelphia. She was one of the youngest members and had to stand on a chair so those people in the back could see the pride of South Philadelphia. Her father was proud too, but protective. He didn't want anyone taking advantage of his child. Father's love made Marian feel important. When he died after an injury at the Reading Terminal, where he sold ice, tragedy filled Marian's heart, and sometimes filled her songs. Mother was happy for Marian's success, but reminded her that no matter what, she studied to take a little extra time and do it well. Marian didn't need an extra encouragement when it came to singing. She practiced each part of her song and often learned the other people's parts too. For her, music was serious business, and more than nothing, she hoped to someday go to music school. Church members promised tuition for our Marian if she was accepted. Since Father's death, Marian worked at odd jobs and sang in concert programs in order to help support her family. It wasn't until 1915, when Marian was 18, that she finally went to a music school and patiently waited in line for an application. But the little girl behind the counter helped everyone except Marian. Was she invisible? Finally, the girl said, "We don't take colored." Her voice sounded like a steel door clanking shut. Marian knew about prejudice. She had seen the trolley drive past her family as they stood at the corner. She knew that her people were always the last to be helped in a store. But she could not understand how anyone who was surrounded by the spirit and beauty of music could be so narrow-minded. She felt sick in her stomach and in her heart. Didn't they know that her skin was different but her feelings were the same? Couldn't she be a professional singer if she was a Negro? With unwavering faith, Mother told her that there would be another way to accomplish what would have been done at that school. Marian believed her mother. She took voice lessons in her own neighborhood, continued with the choirs, and sometimes performed at Negro churches and Negro colleges. When Marian saw a Metropolitan Opera performance of the tragic opera Madame Butterfly, thoughts of a formal music education again came to mind. How wonderful it would be to sing on a grand stage, act out a dramatic role, and wear beautiful costumes. The passionate music inspired her, and she was determined to study. But opera was simply the sun and the moon, a dream that seems too far away to reach. As a young woman in her 20s, Marian was invited to many states to sing. Sometimes she traveled with her accompanist by train where they were seated in the dirty and crowded Jim Crow car reserved for Negroes. When she arrived at her destination, she often sang the same program twice to separate audiences, one white and one black, or to segregated groups, whites in the best seats and blacks in the balcony. Many times she was welcomed enthusiastically by her audiences and then could not go to a hotel room because she was Negro. No matter what humiliations she endured, Marian sang her heart with dignity. Her voice left audiences weeping or in hushed awe as they strained to hold on to the memory of every opulent note. Marian still wanted to advance her singing with master teachers. With the help of friends, she was granted an audition with the fierce yet famous Giuseppe Boghetti. When she arrived at his studio, Mr. Boghetti announced that he didn't have time or room for new students. Too afraid to even look at him, Marian took a deep breath. Slowly, with a great emotion, she sang Deep River. Marian finally lifted her eyes. "I will make room for you right away," Mr. Boghetti said firmly, "and I will need 2 years with you. After that, you will be able to go and sing anywhere and sing for anybody." Again, Marian's devoted church community raised the money for her lessons. Marian worked hard with Mr. Boghetti, and sometimes for practice she sang scenes from Italian operas with him. Her recitals now included German songs too, but other languages troubled her. She didn't want to simply sing words like Dunkel wie dunkel in Wald und in Feld. She wanted to know what the words meant. Dark, how dark in the woods and the fields. Other Negro singers had gone overseas to develop their voices and learn foreign languages. Why not her? After all, Europe was different. There she would be able to sing to mixed audiences and travel without the restrictions put on her people in America. Marian needed to grow, and Mother agreed. A bundle of trepidation and excitement, Marian boarded the Ile-de-France in October 1927. She had never been so far from her family. She knew her sisters would take care of her mother, but she already felt twinges of homesickness. Marian studied and eventually was invited to perform in concert halls in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. The enthusiasm for her singing was so overwhelming that one newspaper in Sweden called it Marian Fever. Audiences applauded in London, cheered in Paris, and pounded on the stage for encores in Russia. In Austria, the world-famous conductor Arturo Toscani announced that what he had heard was one privileged only to hear in 100 years. Marian felt as if she'd finally achieved some success. She even asked Mother if there was anything that she wanted to make her happy because now Marian could afford to buy it for her. Marian said that all she wanted was for God to hold Marian in the highest of his hands. It seemed like she was already there. Mr. Boghetti had been right. She could go anywhere and sing for anyone. until she came home to the United States. In 1939, Howard University in Washington, D.C. booked a concert with Marian Anderson and began looking for an auditorium big enough to hold the audience she attracted. They decided that the 4,000-seat Constitution Hall would be perfect, but the manager of the hall said it wasn't available and no other dates were offered because their white performers only policy. Marian's agent, Saul Hurak, wrote to the hall manager, pointing out that Marian Anderson was one of the greatest living singers of our time, but it did no good. Enraged fans wrote letters to the newspaper. In protest, Eleanor Roosevelt, the First Lady of the United States, resigned from the organization that sponsored the Constitution Hall. Howard University then tried to reserve a large high school auditorium from an all-white school. Again, they were denied. Now teachers were angry and marched in support of Marian in front of the Board of Education. Washington, D.C. was a boiling pot about to spill over. Wasn't there some place in her own country's capital where Marian's voice could be heard? Committees formed and held meetings. Finally, with President Roosevelt's approval, the Department of the Interior of the United States government invited Marian to sing on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial on Easter Sunday. Her country was offering her a momentous invitation, but she had concerns. Would people protest? Was it dangerous? Would anyone come? Examining her heart, Marian realized that although she was a singer first and foremost, she had also become a symbol to her people, and she wanted to make it easier for those who would follow her. She said yes. Standing in front of the shadow of the statue of Lincoln, waiting to be called out, she read the engraved words, "The nation under God shall have a birth of freedom." Marian looked out over a river of 75,000 people. Her heart beat wildly. Would she be able to utter one note? She took a deep breath and felt the power of her audience's goodwill surge towards her. Marian's sisters were there, and mother too. Marian stood straight and tall, then she closed her eyes and began singing, "My Country 'Tis of Thee." A roaring cheer following every song. At the end of the program, the people pleaded for more. When she began her thought-provoking encore, she began singing, "Nobody Knows the Trouble I See," and silence settled on the multitudes. For almost 16 years after the Lincoln Memorial performance, Marian sang for kings and queens, presidents and prime ministers, famous composers and conductors. She received medals, awards, and honorary degrees for her magnificent voice, but there was still one place Marian had not sung. When she was finally invited, a dream came true. Marian wondered how people would react. No Negro singer had ever done such a thing. She would be the first, but she didn't need to worry. After she signed a contract, someone said, "Welcome home." On opening night, excitement charged the air. As Marian waited in the wings, the orchestra began. Her stomach fluttered. She walked onto the grand stage. Trembling, she straightened her costume and waited for the pounding music as she knew to be her cue. Tonight was her debut with the Metropolitan Opera. At long last, she reached the sun and the moon. The curtains parted. All right, I'm going to provide you with a little bit of background information about Marian Anderson from the book When Marian Sang. These are some excerpts from biography.com. You can visit this link here to view some more information about Marian. Marian Anderson was born on February 27, 1897, and she died April 8, 1993. She was deemed as one of the finest contraltos of her time. Marian Anderson became the first African American to perform with the New York Metropolitan Opera in 1955. So what is the Metropolitan Opera? From their site, metopera.org, the Met Opera is a vibrant home for the most creative and talented singers, conductors, composers, musicians, stage directors, designers, visual artists, choreographers, and dancers from around the world. It was founded in 1883 and was the first opera house built on Broadway on 39th Street. A little bit more about Marian Anderson. She displayed great vocal talent as a child. We learned about that throughout reading our story. We also learned that her family was unable to afford lessons, so her church helped raise money to support her lessons. And she also performed at the Lincoln Memorial in 1939, which helped set the stage for the Civil Rights era. We'll see a little bit about the Civil Rights era in this video and also another lesson coming soon. Here is the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. And we remember that Marian Anderson got vocal training with Giuseppe Buggetti, and she also won a chance to sing at the Lewisham Stadium in New York. This was sponsored by the New York Philharmonic Symphony. She struggled with success as a vocalist in her own country, which is the United States. We learned about that in our video. But we also know that she performed the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, at the inauguration of President John F. Kennedy. So just a little bit of an overview of the Civil Rights Movement, more to come soon. The Civil Rights Movement was an organized effort by Black Americans to end racial discrimination and gain equal rights under the law. It began in the late 1940s and ended in the late 1960s. Although tumultuous at times, the movement was mostly nonviolent and resulted in laws to protect every American's constitutional rights, regardless of color, race, sex, or national origin. You can find out more about the Civil Rights Movement by going to this link here. I'll include it in the description below. So I hope that this gives you a little bit more information and background after having listened to and read our story, When Marian Sang.